Hi, and welcome to my Massive Darkness review. This is a co-op dungeon crawler mixed with a pure Amerithrash. It is designed by Raphael Goutin, Jean-Baptiste Lullian, and Nicholas Rout. I apologize if those names are pronounced incorrectly. It's produced by Simon Games, otherwise known as Cool Mini or Not. It can play with 1 to 6 players, and you get tons of stuff in this box. You get 75 miniatures, you get 9 game board tiles, you get 6 hero dashboards. These are these nice plastic dashboards. We'll go into the components a little bit later. You get 6 hero class sheets. You get all the colored bases to make sure you can distinguish between your people. You get 12 custom dice. That is all the dice you will ever need. That's a nice little tidbit there. You get 18 colored pegs to track on your game board. You get 299 cards. There are tons of cards, as you can see. Plenty of cards. I almost wish they had put one more card in there to make it 300. And 106 tokens. You get plenty of cardboard in this game. It takes about 3 to 4 hours to play an entire game, depending on the scenario you're playing. Some are shorter and some are longer. It also depends on just how quickly you run through it. So, how do you play? The basic of the gameplay is you start in the starting location, and typically you're going towards the end location, or the exit. Each scenario is a little different, but along the way you will be moving, you'll be opening doors, fighting monsters, fighting large monsters, looting chests, getting tons and tons of equipment, equipping that equipment, and going through completing objectives. Some of those objectives can include things like destroying columns, or outrunning lava, or chasing down a monster, or killing a certain monster, unlocking things. There are many different scenarios, each one a little bit different, so there's plenty of gameplay variety in that sense. Along the way, you will be leveling up through XP and increasing in strength via the equipment that you use and the skills that you get in your class sheet. Alright, that is a quick overview. Let's get in to look at some of these components a little bit closer up. So, as always, the basic component of this game, unless it's a pure card game, typically has some cardboard. And the cardboard here is actually quite good. As you can see, it does have a little bit of gloss. Some people can like this, some people don't, but look how thick that is. It's actually very, very nice. It is quite, it's got some heft to it. It's very strong. You can't really bend it. The sides are not sealed, so it could get wet, but all around very good. You can purchase some plastic tokens if you wish, and the only thing then that would be cardboard would be the game board pieces. The game board tiles are double-sided, so that doubles the possibilities of the variants, along with each edge being able to connect as you wish. You'll notice on these game board pieces that there are light zones, and dark zones. The light zones are typically a little bit more dangerous. You cannot hide from enemies, and you can't do your shadow skill modes. So there are special abilities you can use only in shadow, and each section of the tile is denoted as either light or dark. Of course, you get a rules and quests booklet. This is actually fairly thick, full color. On the back, it shows you pretty much everything you need to know to start playing. You could start playing and then just kind of reference as you go. It's fairly well organized. Lots of examples. It's actually quite nice, and it has about 10, I believe, 10 quests? Yes. 10 quests, so lots and lots of quests as well, which is, again, quite nice. Lots of gameplay variety in there. And of course you have your hero boards. These are nice, thick plastic. They have little pegs to denote your XP or your health, and they're very easy to slide out cardboard, which is nice, but not too hard. And of course, each hero will need a class sheet. You can mix and match these, which is kind of nice, but for beginners, they do give you recommended class. Here's the Nightshade Rager. I'm not going to go into each one. I'm just going to kind of explain the gist of it. So right here, you'll have a signature. This is a skill you can use XP. You can spend 1 XP to use it. You can only do it once per turn. Then you have your free class skill, and this will just give you a skill. And this one's a keyword. Other times it describes it. And this you can use at any time during your turn. Then there are these levels. These levels denote the game board level. So on the game board, you'll have a 1, 2, 3, all the way to 5. And as you move to the tile that one's placed on, the game turns into that level. This affects monster spawns, but the skills you can use as well. Each one has a tree. You have to have one before the other, but each one replaces it. So if this has +1 max health, and this is +2 max health, that's a total of +2, not +3. You would have to spend the XP accordingly, so 5 and 10, and it just goes on from there, and you have a multitude of them. As I said before, you get a total of 3 die per color. It's the max you'll need, so you get the red and yellow attack die and the blue and green defense die. They get stronger and stronger. So green is stronger than blue and red is stronger than yellow. As stated before, you get plenty of cards. This is one of the regular mobs. As you can see, it's based off of the level 1 through 5. So depending on the game level, you'll spawn a different one that just becomes stronger. It has a basic name, the amount of health per unit, and how many you get per player. So it scales to the amount of players. Additionally, you see how many attack it roll in melee, ranged, magic, and how many defense die it rolls. Additionally, with this, you will spawn a equipment card. The equipment card will spawn below it, and you will see essentially this part. And so it can make it a little bit stronger. Here, it would get +1 blue die in defense. Once you kill all of the mob, that includes the minions and the boss, you will get this item. So you actively kill things and loot, which is pretty fun. Additionally, there are roaming monsters. Here is a lesser roaming monster. Later on in the game, you'll spawn a greater roaming monster, which is just a little bit stronger. As you can see, they have health that scales with the player count, so you get 6 health per player. They all have a special ability. This is a fairly standard one. They become much more unique, though. And you have their same attack, ranged, magic, and defense. Okay, so what did I think? Well, I'm going to start with the bad and end with the good. First of all, I don't actually like the combat system too much. Now, part of this is because it's a lighter game when it comes to the amount of decisions you need to make. That doesn't mean it's not strategic. It just means that you're not presented with a laundry list of 20 different things you could possibly do every single action. And that has both its pros and cons. The con of this being that all of your skills essentially modify the dice. So you roll the dice, both defense and attack together, and then you have to figure out what happened. Now, that's not as simple as just counting the amount of attacks and then subtracting the amount of shields, and then that is your wounds. Because you could be in shadow mode, they could be in shadow mode. You could be able to flip a dice. They could be able to remove one of your dice. It all depends on a myriad of different skills, position on the board, and the different abilities that you have as a hero. And what that means is you have the complexity without the depth when it comes to the combat system itself. So where to move and what order to do things, and that's still there, but you roll the dice and then you have to figure things out. And that bogs down the combat system, which is the opposite of what this game needs, because the game in itself is essentially a pure Amerithrash, where you're just running and gunning and mowing things down and looting and getting stronger. But then when the combat slows down, it's polarizing, right? Because you have every other bit of the game pushing you to quick, sudden death matches with many foes and doing some basic math over and over and over again every time you do any kind of combat. So I don't like that. I also don't like the fact that with the lack of skills, you can't mitigate luck. What I mean by that is there is always a possibility that some roaming monster is attacking you and you roll the max amount of attack and it's enough to kill you in one hit. Remember, the max health you can possibly have is 8 in this game total ever. And you start with 5. Or with 7, I apologize. And you start with 5. You can get up to +2 health. And so if you roll nothing but blank defense and they roll max attack, you're dead in one hit. And there's nothing you can really do about it. You can't choose, oh, well, I'm going to do this here, or I'm going to not have my turn, or there is no options. The die roll is the die roll. After you figure everything out, you can't then choose to do something different because there are no inherent skills. Additionally, it's actually quite easy to game the system somewhat. So you cannot move away from a monster unless you have a special ability. And that monster cannot move away from you unless they have a special ability. That means you can strategically lock enemies in place with, let's say, a tank character, while everybody else goes along their merry business. So it can kind of gamify. This is more of a nitpick. But if that situation is right and it presents itself, it's actually quite easy, especially if the tank character can't slip away. Because at that point, you get to choose when to detach and run to the exit, or whatever it is you have to do. Speaking of roaming monsters, I don't think there's quite enough in the base game to warrant longevity. And what I mean by that is you can play through the entire quest, probably 2 times even, and be okay. But if we're talking years down the line, you're not going to pick this game up and play it with multiple gaming groups over a long period of time. Not without buying additional packs of monsters, which there are some, and they're fantastic, and they're good purchases. At least every single one that I've seen has been. And while you don't feel like, oh, I have to go get it, they don't do anything sneaky like in Descent where all the lieutenants, all the cool minis are sold separately. You get everything in the box. You're going to be spawning the same monsters over and over again. And it's not just the roaming monsters, it's the mobs as well. There's only dwarves, orcs, and goblins. However, they are kind of cannon fodder. You spawn them and you kill them quite quickly. The roaming monsters are what add a lot of the variety. Because there are no skills, then it's just a scenario, which is always unique and different and quite well made, actually. And then there's the roaming monster special abilities, where some of them are attacking multiple units, some of them go after the weakest, some of them... I mean, there's a myriad of things they can do, and they're all interesting and just kind of change up and spice up the gameplay. But with only a couple in the core game, it could use maybe a few more. I would have liked to maybe give up something and get just even one more roaming monster. But perhaps I just like their gameplay variants so much. And you can always buy more. And lastly, the last negative I have with this is the story mode. There is technically a story mode where you go from scenario 1 or quest 1 to quest 10, and you level up throughout it, and you keep all of your equipment. Now, the problem with that is how they did it is kind of tacked on. First of all, the story isn't like mind-blowing. It's certainly not a first-time Dungeon Master could think of a better Dungeons and Dragons game. So it's not super in-depth, or it's just kind of a ho-hum, let's go kill some bad guys story, which fits the game, but not for a campaign, right? And you essentially get way slower XP, so you level up slower. So by the time you're done, you're a higher level, but you start out very low level. And the scenarios are not written with that in mind. I don't recall if this was a Kickstarter stretch goal or not, but it does seem pretty much tacked on. So if you're buying this, don't expect to be playing a whole long campaign. Instead, enjoy the quests one-off. They're fantastic that way, and definitely that is what I would recommend. So, on to the pros. What do I like? As I already said, the roaming monsters, fantastic variety. Each one acts different. Each one, you know exactly where you're going up against, and you can read their card, and they all act different, and you have to strategize with all your other teammates on how you're best. You're going to, interact with them. You even have the option to hide from them, though that doesn't present itself too much. But either way, they're all very cool. And part of that's because the minis are amazing. These are the best minis I have seen in a board game, period. Now, that's excluding, tabletop games, or that's their bread and butter. That being said, Simon, pretty much their bread and butter, too. They do fantastic sculpts. And it's not just the quality of the mold. It's not just the amount of minis, but it's the sculpt and the design of them are all very, very cool. And there's a wide variety of different styles, and they all fit, but they're all not what you would necessarily expect in a dungeon crawler either, and just very good quality miniatures, which thumbs up for me because I'm going to be painting them. Additionally, this is kind of a Descent Light. So if you've played Descent Journeys of the Dark, which I pretty much just call Descent 2.0, it's the second iteration of Descent, it is kind of the game board standard of dungeon crawlers as far as I'm concerned. Now, this is essentially Descent Light. Now, I find that good because my gaming group, more often than not, is my family, in which case I have smaller children, and they can sometimes struggle with all the decisions that they make. Now, if you recall before on the cons, I mentioned that you don't have a lot of necessarily decisions. Like, there's strategy, but you're not like, oh, I'm going to do this, and that'll allow me to do that, and then you can follow up with that. It's checkers, not chess, if that makes sense. You're not strategizing and having to think at a higher level. Therefore, my kids can play it, participate, and have fun. Meanwhile, it's still fun enough, and it's still, just as much of a dungeon romp that I get the kick out of the dungeon crawler without so much of a heavy game in the back end, which works for me. Depending on your gaming group, you can judge that yourself, perhaps try it out and see if you like it. And part of that dungeon romp is just because this is just a loot cycle game. If you've played video games like Diablo or any of those other action RPGs where you're just killing things and the combat isn't necessarily difficult, but it is enjoyable to gain power, and so the combat isn't what's enjoyable necessarily. It's defeating monsters, getting loot, looting more, becoming stronger, defeating monsters, and that cycle continues. So you're leveling up and you're doing all that, and that is constant in this game. This game has you constantly gaining XP and leveling up and killing monsters and feeling accomplishments and, getting that sense of satisfaction over and over and over again. You rarely go a turn where you're frustrated or upset. It's only kind of if you have one of those bad die rolls. Otherwise, you're progressing, and that's fun as a player. So while it's casual, it's also satisfying, as opposed to maybe a shorter casual game. Now, while this game is longer, I think it still holds up. If it was any longer, I would say it's too casual for its length. However, I think in this one, it works because I just have a blast playing it. And lastly, the strategy isn't all gone, because a part of it even happens before the game. I showed you the class sheets, and I showed you the heroes, and the heroes have abilities, and the classes have abilities, and you can pair any amount you want. I already have a hero and class pair that is my tank. It is not the recommended class, but I like it. This tank can essentially kill people by being hurt, because he hurts them back. It's fantastic. I really like playing that character, because you just stand there like, yeah, go ahead, attack me. I hope you roll well, even, right? Because you're not going to get hurt, and they are. I also have a healing class, which is actually kind of cool. And again, it's a class combination and a hero combination that is not recommended, but I find it really well. Because I have about 3 different ways to heal people, so even if one doesn't work, or one isn't in the right scenario, or whatever, I still have like 2 more I can try and kind of heal up. So the party is essentially floating at max health all the time, which then makes other people who are typically more weak feel like they can really just kind of run up and do stuff. And I don't know about all of your, people you play with, but I know my son digs that a lot. Just run up and attack and not have a care in the world because I'm going to be healing him. So that's always fun too. Okay, so final thoughts. In summary, I find that there are some core problems in the game, but overall, if you're looking for just a fun dungeon romp as opposed to a dungeon crawler, so it doesn't have quite as much depth, but has all the fun out of that, minus the fun of the deep strategy that some of us do find, you're going to love this game. If you're a fan of the hobby of miniatures, so if you're just looking for miniatures, this is actually a good purchase just for them. In fact, I know people who have bought the game just for that. And in fact, when you buy these boxes, when you buy these products, on the back it even says, feel free to use these. Use them, stream them, do whatever you want. Have a blast. They are great miniatures. So I get tons of hobby content. I have a fun time with my family, and overall, just an enjoyable experience. However, if you're really into that kind of more deep and nuanced strategy, which I appreciate too, and that's why there are multiple games out there, and I can pick one off my shelf, one versus the other, you won't find it here. There's not a super amount of depth. So it is more casual, but it's not a filler game either, especially because of its length. So everybody has to want to spend a couple hours mowing down enemies in a dungeon. Overall, with taking the faults of the combat system and the pure joy of just mowing down enemies and becoming this huge, strong person with great equipment, I would put this at about an 8 for me. What I mean by that is it fits my family's need perfectly so that I can have game night after game night of enjoyable dungeon crawling experiences and not have to babysit everything or become kind of a general when it comes to telling people what they should and shouldn't do. If your gaming group doesn't match that, if your gaming group isn't okay with kind of a more lengthy casual, I would lower it to probably a 7. It's by far not a bad game, but it does have a few issues, so it's not quite that 9-10. However, for me, it is an 8. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. I actually have been painting these miniatures, so if you want to see that, I'm about to link to it. So just stay at the end and you'll see that. Additionally, I'm going to be showing you how I store the game with all of these minis, and especially because I have the Kickstarter and a few expansions, so there's a lot of stuff. I'm going to show you what I do to set up and tear down the game a little bit quicker and store the miniatures. It's not perfect. In fact, it's kind of wonky, so maybe you want to check that out too. I'll link to that as well at the end. Anyway, thanks so much for watching this. I hope you enjoyed my review of Massive Darkness. It's actually my first review, so be kind, but feel free to give me feedback. I would love some feedback, actually. If you did like this video, be sure to click that thumbs up button. I always appreciate it. Let me know any feedback in the comments below, or just what you thought, or if you disagree or agree, let's hash out and discuss it civilly down in the comments. I would love to have a discussion with you guys. Subscribe if you want to see more. I'm going to keep doing some of these reviews, mostly focusing on kind of the hobby of the miniatures, at least for now, but I'll have plenty of board game content coming your way. Additionally, if you want to actually support the page, currently I make no money off of YouTube, and even if I did, it would be very minimal. So check out my Patreon. Even for $1 a month, that's $12 for the entire year. You would make my day. I would be able to do more of this, bring you guys more content, buy more stuff to review it and paint it and show you guys, and overall just have this discussion about this board game industry. So thanks so much for your support, regardless of how it comes, and I will talk to you guys again next time.